desert stretched endlessly under the burning sun. The land was dry. The wind carried sand across the red cliffs and the ground cracked with thirst. The Apache mother knelt in the middle of the wasteland, her long black hair braided with beads. Her eyes fierce yet weary. Beside her sat her 3 children, their faces covered with dust, their lips cracked from thirst and hunger. They pressed close to her, seeking comfort and warmth. Though the desert offered none, the mother pulled them close and whispered softly to them words of strength, words of survival, though her own heart ached with fear. The children had not eaten in days. They were tired, too tired to cry, too tired to play, too tired to even hope. The oldest girl stared at the horizon, her eyes sharp but empty. The younger girl leaned against her mother, too weak to move, and the youngest child sat in the sand, his small hands clutching the hem of his mother's dress, his head heavy against her lap. The mother stroked his hair, whispering, "I am not afraid to die, but my children are hungry." Her voice cracked, but she would not let her tears fall, for she had promised herself to stay strong until the very end. Across the horizon came the sound of hooves, slow, steady, and heavy against the sand. The children looked up with sudden alertness, and the mother turned her head, her sharp eyes scanning the figure of a man riding a tired horse. The cowboy approached cautiously, his wide hat shading his face, his boots dusty from miles of travel. A gun hung at his hip, though his hand did not rest on it. Instead, his eyes softened as he saw the family before him. He slowed his horse, then dismounted, the leather saddle creaking as he swung his leg over. He walked toward them, his steps heavy in the sand, his shadow stretching long behind him. He removed his hat, bowed his head slightly, and said in a quiet, respectful voice, "Ma'am, do you need help?" The mother straightened her back, her pride shining even in her weakness. She met his eyes and said, "I am not afraid to die, but my children are hungry." The words cut through the silence like a blade. The cowboy froze, his heart tightening at the sight of the children, their eyes hollow, their cheeks thin. He dropped to his knees before them and opened his saddlebag. Inside he carried dried meat, beans, bread, hard from travel but still food. He laid it out carefully before the mother. The children stared, their eyes wide, but they did not move until their mother nodded, giving them silent permission. Only then did the children reach for the food, their small hands trembling as they took careful bites, savoring each piece as if afraid it might disappear. The cowboy watched them, his throat tight. He felt the weight of something larger than himself. In that moment he knew no law or border or difference mattered when children sat starving in the desert. The mother looked at him, her eyes filled with strength, not weakness. She said, "You give food, but food is gone quickly. What will happen?" After he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch of coins, the wages he had saved from long months of hard work. He placed it in her hands and said, "This is for you and your children. It is not much, but it will buy you time." The mother looked down at the coins, then back at him. She did not shed tears, she only nodded her head and said, "You give me more than food, you give me a chance." The cowboy shifted on his knees and said, "There is a settlement east of here near the river there. You will find water and people who will trade. I can take you and your children there." The mother hesitated, her eyes narrowing with caution. Trust was not given easily, not on this land, but when she looked at her children, she knew they would not last long without help. She finally nodded and said, "Guide us, cowboy, we will follow you." The cowboy stood. He lifted the youngest child into his arms. The little one clung to his neck, his small body light from hunger. The cowboy held him gently, as if he were his own. The journey began across the burning desert. The sun beat down on them, but the cowboy carried water from his flask, giving it first to the children, then to the mother, and only then, taking a sip himself. The oldest girl walked beside him, her small legs steady, though her face showed the strain of the heat. The younger girl stumbled often, but her mother held her hand, never letting go. The cowboy spoke to them as they walked, telling stories of horses and rivers and stars that guided travelers at night. The children listened, their eyes wide, as if the words themselves carried them forward. As night fell, they stopped by a rocky outcrop. The cowboy built a small fire with dried wood he carried in his pack. He shared the last of his beans and bread. The mother watched him closely, studying every movement as if searching for deception, but she found only sincerity in his eyes when the children fell asleep, curled together under a blanket. The mother spoke softly. She said, "Why do you help us, cowboy? We are not of your people, and yet you give us your food, your water, your strength." He looked at the fire for a long time, then answered, "Because no child should starve and no mother should watch her children suffer, not while I draw breath." The mother listened, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "You carry sorrow in your eyes, cowboy. Who did you lose?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I once had a wife. She died giving birth to our child. The child did not live either since then. I wander this land trying to find a reason to keep moving." His voice cracked, but he steadied it. The mother looked at him with new understanding. She said then, "Perhaps this is your reason. Perhaps the spirits brought you to us." He met her eyes, and for the first time in years he felt something stir within him, something like hope. The next morning they continued their journey. The children stronger now from food and rest. The cowboy carried the youngest again, his strong arm steady though his back ached. The mother walked beside him, her hand sometimes brushing against his when the path grew narrow. They did not speak of it, but both felt the quiet bond growing between them. By the third day they reached the settlement, a small cluster of cabins near a stream, smoke rising from chimneys. Voices carrying in the air, the cowboy led them to a woman who ran a trading post. She gave them more food and fresh water in exchange for a few of the coins the cowboy had given. The children drank deeply, their eyes brightening with life. The mother stood tall, her shoulders straight, her gaze sharp but softened. When she looked at her children, she placed a hand on the cowboy's arm, her grip firm. She said, "You came as a stranger, but you leave as a brother. You gave more than food, you gave us hope." He tipped his hat, his eyes glistening, though he did not let the tears fall. He said, "Ma'am, you have more strength than any warrior I have known. Your children will live because of you, not me." He stayed only long enough to be certain they were safe. Then he saddled his horse. The children ran to him, hugging his legs, their small arms clinging tightly. The mother stood behind them, her eyes steady, but her lips trembling as if she wanted to say more, but chose silence instead. The cowboy knelt, hugged the children one last time, and then climbed onto his horse. He looked back once as he rode away. The mother stood framed by the setting sun, her children beside, her strong, proud, unbroken. He carried that image in his heart as he vanished into the desert, knowing he had given not just food, not just coins, but something far greater. And so the cowboy rode on through the endless frontier, his heart no longer empty, his purpose no longer lost, for in the eyes of a mother who was not afraid to die but feared for her hungry children, he had rediscovered his own reason to live.